They called her a curse, a ghost, a mistake of nature. In the scorched wilderness of the 1876 Dakota Territory, Evelyn Hope was left to die simply because her skin was white as snow. She prepared for death, but fate sent a Lakota warrior instead. What happens when two enemies, a banished girl and a hunted warrior, find love in a hopeless place? This is their true story. The Montana sun in August was not a warmth, it was a weapon. For 18-year-old Evelyn Hope, it was a sentence of torture. She sat on a flat, dusty rock, her knees pulled to her chest, listening to the creaking wood of the wagon fading into the distance. She didn't watch it go. She couldn't. Her eyes, pale violet and sensitive to the light, watered uncontrollably in the midday glare. To look up would be to be blinded. "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away," Reverend Elias Thorne had said, his voice devoid of pity. "You are a blight on Blackwood Creek, Evelyn. The drought started when you bled. The sickness took the cattle when you looked upon them. You are a white demon, and we return you to the hell from which you crawled." Her own father, a broken man named Thomas, hadn't even looked at her. He just snapped the reins. Now the silence of the Badlands was deafening. Evelyn pulled the thin, tattered shawl over her head, trying to shield her translucent skin. She was born with albinism, a condition the superstitious settlers of Blackwood Creek didn't understand and refused to tolerate. They saw her milk-white hair and pale eyes not as a medical anomaly, but as a mark of the devil. She touched her cheek. It was already blistering. Without shelter, she would be dead within 2 days from exposure alone. If the coyotes didn't get her first. "I am not a devil," she whispered to the dry sagebrush, her voice cracking. "I'm just Evelyn." Hours bled into a terrifying twilight. The temperature plummeted. Evelyn shivered, her teeth chattering violently. She was small for her age, her growth stunted by years of malnutrition. Her family had often fed her last, afraid that touching her would curdle the milk. As the moon rose, painting the jagged buttes in silver, Evelyn heard the snap of a twig. She froze. It wasn't the wind. Detailed maps from the U.S. Army at Fort Keogh labeled this area as hostile territory. This was the hunting ground of the Sioux, the Lakota, and the Cheyenne. The people her father had told her were bloodthirsty savages who would scalp a woman as soon as look at her. "If they find me," she thought, tears spilling over her burning cheeks, "at least it will be quick, quicker than the sun." She curled into a ball beneath a rocky overhang, clutching a small, smooth river stone, the only toy she had ever owned. She closed her burning eyes and waited for the end. She didn't hear the soft rhythm of unshod hooves approaching from the ridge above. She didn't see the shadow that blotted out the stars. She only knew that for the first time in her life, she was truly, completely alone. Or so she thought. Chayton sat atop his paint Mustang, Kangji, blending perfectly into the limestone ridge. At 24, he was a warrior of the Oglala Lakota, a man whose name meant falcon, and he possessed the eyes to match. He was not looking for game today. He was watching the dust cloud to the east, a cavalry patrol moving toward the Little Bighorn. The war for the Black Hills was raging, and General Miles was tightening the noose around Chayton's people. Trust was a currency no one could afford. He was about to turn Kangji back toward his camp when a flash of unnatural white caught his eye in the gully below. Chayton frowned, his hand instinctively going to the Winchester rifle holstered at his knee. A wolf? No, too large. A spirit? The Lakota held great reverence for the white buffalo, a sign of prophecy and change. But this looked like a person. Curiosity, dangerous and pulling, drew him down the slope. He moved silently, his moccasins making no sound on the hard earth. As he neared the overhang, he saw it. A girl, but not like any girl he had ever seen. Her hair was a spill of moonlight, stark white against the grey rock. Her skin was so pale it looked like fresh snow, glowing softly in the dark. She was curled up, shivering violently, looking as fragile as a bird with a broken wing. Chaitan lowered his rifle. Wanagi, a ghost. He took a step forward, and a loose stone skittered under his foot. The girl gasped, her head snapping up. Chaitan stopped. Her eyes found him in the darkness. They were wide, terrified, and a color he had never seen on a human being, a pale, shifting violet. "Please," she rasped, her voice thin and dry. She spoke English. "Make it quick." She thought he was going to kill her. Chaitan looked at her closely. He saw the angry red burns on her face where the sun had flayed her. He saw the hollows of her cheeks. This was no spirit. This was a woman, abandoned and suffering. "I am not death," Chaitan said, his English heavily accented but clear. He had learned the tongue from a trader years ago, a skill that helped him track the Wasatchu, white men. Evelyn pressed her back against the rock, trembling. The warrior before her was terrifying, broad-shouldered, painted with streaks of yellow ochre, feathers tied into his dark braids, but he hadn't drawn a weapon. "Who left you?" Chaitan asked, his voice deep, vibrating through the small space between them. My people," Evelyn stammered. "They said I am a curse." Chaitan scoffed, a harsh sound in his throat. "The Wasatchu fear what they do not understand. They throw away gold because it does not look like silver." He stepped closer, and Evelyn flinched, covering her face. "Look at me," he commanded, though not unkindly. Slowly she lowered her hands. Chaitan crouched down. Up close, he could smell the sickness on her, the dehydration, the fever from the sunburn. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. She held her breath. He brushed a thumb beneath her eye, wiping away a tear. His skin was warm, rough with calluses, contrasting sharply with her coolness. "You are burning," he said. "The Sun Father has kissed you too hard." "I can't be in the light," she whispered. "It hurts." Chaitan looked up at the sky. Dawn was only a few hours away. If he left her here, the next day's sun would kill her. If he took her with him, he risked bringing a white woman, a Wasatchu, into his camp during a time of war. It could invite the anger of the soldiers. It could bring the anger of his own chief. But Chaitan lived by a code. You do not leave the helpless to the wolves. Suddenly, Kangji whinnied softly from the ridge. Chaitan's head snapped toward the sound. He heard it too, the heavy rhythmic clatter of iron horseshoes on rock. The patrol he had seen earlier had doubled back. They were close. "Soldiers!" Chaitan hissed. Evelyn's eyes went wide. "My father. He told them where to find the trail. He told them about the savages." "He told them nothing," Chaitan said, grabbing her arm. "He left you as bait, or he left you to die. It matters not. We must move." "I can't walk," she cried, trying to stand, but stumbling on weak legs. Chaitan didn't hesitate. He swept her up into his arms, as if she weighed nothing more than a bundle of dry grass. For a moment, Evelyn was pressed against his chest, smelling the scent of pine, leather, and wood smoke. She felt the beat of his heart. Steady, strong, alive. "Hold on," he said. He carried her up the ridge to his horse. He mounted in one fluid motion and pulled her up in front of him. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind picking up. Chaitan wrapped one arm securely around her waist, taking the reins with the other. He looked down at the pale, frightened creature in his arms. "To the shadows," he said. "Where the sun cannot find you." He kicked the horse into a gallop, riding hard away from the encroaching soldiers, carrying the white girl of Blackwood Creek into a world she had been taught to fear. But the only place that might just keep her alive, the entry into the Lakota encampment, was a gauntlet of silence. As Chayton rode Kanji between the rows of painted buffalo-hide tipis, the daily rhythm of the village halted. Women crushing choke cherries stopped their work. Children playing with stick horses froze. All eyes turned to the bundle in the warrior's arms, a woman who glowed like the moon itself. Evelyn buried her face in Chayton's buckskin shirt, the smell of wood smoke and sage overwhelming her senses. She felt the weight of 100 stares. To them, she knew what she looked like. A spectre, a bad omen. "Keep your head down," Chayton murmured, his chest vibrating against her cheek. "Do not look them in the eye. Fear makes men dangerous." He halted before a lodge adorned with red-painted thunderbirds. An older woman emerged. Her face was a map of deep lines, her eyes sharp as obsidian. This was Ayana, the tribe's healer and Chayton's aunt. Chayton slid off the horse, still cradling Evelyn. He spoke to Ayana in Lakota, his voice low and urgent. Ayana looked at Evelyn. She didn't flinch. She reached out a weathered hand and touched Evelyn's sun-blistered arm. She clicked her tongue, a sound of pity, not malice. "Bring her in," Ayana said in broken English. "The sun is angry with this one." Inside the lodge, the air was cool and smelled of sweet grass. For the next 3 weeks, this dim tent became Evelyn's entire world. Ayana treated Evelyn's burns with a salve made of bear grease and pulverized herbs. The pain, which had been a screaming fire, dulled to a throb, and then a memory. But the real healing came from Chayton. He visited every night when the sun was down. He brought her food, venison broth and stewed turnips. At first, they sat in silence. But silence, in the intimacy of the lodge, soon turned to words. Evelyn told him of the Bible verses her father used to justify his cruelty. Chayton told her of Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, who made all things with a purpose. "Even me?" Evelyn asked one night, tracing the scar on her hand where her father had once struck her with a belt. "What purpose is there for a girl who cannot walk in the light?" Chayton was sharpening his knife by the firelight. He stopped and looked at her. His dark eyes softened, the fierceness of the warrior melting into something else, something that made Evelyn's breath hitch. "The owl hunts in the dark," Chayton said softly. "The stars only shine when the sun is gone. Perhaps you are not cursed, Evelyn. Perhaps you are just of the night." He moved closer. The firelight danced on his high cheekbones. He reached out and touched a lock of her white hair. "To my people, white is the color of the north, of wisdom, of the spirit. They fear you because they think you are powerful. I do not fear you." "What do you feel?" she whispered. "I feel peace," he admitted, his thumb brushing her cheek. In that moment, the world outside, the war, the hatred, the soldiers, ceased to exist. Chayton leaned in, and for the first time in her 18 years, Evelyn was not flinching away from a touch. She leaned into it. When his lips brushed hers, it was gentle, terrified, and desperate. It was a promise. But peace in the Dakota Territory of 1876 was a fragile thing. The next morning, the camp was thrown into chaos. A scout galloped in, his horse lathered in foam. He screamed a warning that sent chills down Evelyn's spine. General Crook, the Blue Coats. And with them, a civilian guide who claimed a white demon had been stolen by the savages. The twist was cruel, even for a world as harsh as the West. Evelyn sat in the back of the lodge, listening as Chayton explained the scout's report. Her father, Thomas Hope, had not just abandoned her. He had gone to Fort Fetterman and reported that the Lakota had raided their wagon and kidnapped his daughter. "He is using you," Chayton said, his voice hard as flint. He was painting his face for war, black stripes for victory, red for blood. "He knows the army is looking for a reason to attack us before winter. A kidnapped white girl is the perfect excuse." Evelyn felt bile rise in her throat. "He left me to die. Why would he come back?" "Because he is a failing man," Chayton said, checking the lever of his Winchester. "And the army pays well for information on our location. He sold you for the bounty of a war." The thunder of artillery cut their conversation short. The ground shook. "You must go," Chayton commanded. He grabbed a heavy buffalo robe and threw it over her. "Go up the dried creek bed behind the camp. Wait for me at the Painted Rocks." "No!" Evelyn grabbed his arm. "They will kill you. If they find you here, they will kill us all," he said, pulling away. He looked at her one last time, searing her image into his mind. "Go, Moonchild. Run." Evelyn ran. She scrambled up the rocky ravine behind the camp, the sounds of gunfire and screaming erupting behind her. She didn't feel the sharp stones cutting her feet. She only felt the terror of losing the only man who had ever seen her as human. She reached the ridge and looked back. The valley was filled with smoke. Cavalrymen in blue uniforms were charging through the tippies. Then she saw him, her father. Thomas Hope was sitting on a horse near the edge of the conflict, pointing toward the fleeing women and children. He wasn't looking for her. He was directing the soldiers to the horses. He was stealing the tribe's wealth while the soldiers did the killing. A rage, hot and white, exploded in Evelyn's chest. She didn't run away. She ran down. Evelyn moved like a ghost through the smoke. Her white hair and pale skin, illuminated by the burning lodges, made the soldiers pause in confusion. Was she a spirit? A vision? She reached her father's horse just as he was dismounting to loot a fallen warrior. "Father!" she screamed. Thomas Hope spun around. His eyes went wide with shock. "Evelyn, you're alive?" "You told them I was taken," she hissed, stepping out of the smoke. "You brought death here for money. You should have died in the desert," he spat, raising his revolver. "You're a curse, a freak." Before he could pull the trigger, a shadow flew from the smoke. "Chayton!" The warrior collided with Thomas, knocking the gun away. They rolled in the dust, a tangle of limbs and fury. Thomas was a heavy man, but Chayton fought with the desperate strength of a man protecting his heart. Thomas pulled a hidden knife and slashed, catching Chayton in the shoulder. Chayton roared but didn't let go. He pinned Thomas's hand to the dirt. "Don't!" Evelyn screamed. Chayton froze, his knife raised above Thomas's chest. He looked at Evelyn. "He is your blood," Chayton panted, blood dripping from his shoulder. "No," Evelyn said, her voice shaking, but her eyes clear. She walked over and took the revolver from the dirt. She looked down at the man who had hated her since birth. "He is just a stranger." She fired a shot into the air. "Go," she told her father. "Tell them you were wrong. Tell them you found me dead. If you ever come back, the spirits will take you." Thomas Hope, pale and shaking, scrambled up. He looked at the wild, fierce daughter he didn't recognize, and the warrior who would clearly die for her. He ran. He ran back toward the soldiers, vanishing into the chaos. The battle was turning. The Lakota were retreating into the hills, a strategic withdrawal. Chayton stood, clutching his bleeding shoulder. He looked at Evelyn, really looked at her. She stood amidst the smoke, dust on her white face, a revolver in her hand. She was no longer the fragile bird he had found under the rock. She was a warrior. "We cannot stay here," Chayton said, wincing. "The army will pursue." "Where do we go?" Evelyn asked, moving to support him. North, Chayton said, leaning his weight on her. To Canada. Sitting Bull is going there. The grandmother queen, Queen Victoria, does not hunt us there. Evelyn looked at the northern horizon. It was a cold, hard land. But as she looked at Chayton, she knew that warmth had nothing to do with the sun. Then we go north, she said. They mounted Kanji together, leaving the burning valley of the Rosebud behind. They rode into the twilight. Two outcasts, a warrior without a land and a girl without a people, bound together by a love that had survived the fire. Years later, trappers in the Canadian Rockies would tell stories of a mysterious pair living high in the mountains. A fierce Lakota hunter and his wife, a woman with hair like winter snow, who moved through the forest like a spirit. They say they were the only free things left in the West. Evelyn and Chayton found a freedom that society tried to deny them. In a time when the world saw only black and white, friend and enemy, they found a grey space where love could exist. Their story reminds us that sometimes the family and home we desperately need are found in the very people we are told to fear. Love is the only true survival. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these lost tales of the West. And here is my question for you. If you were Evelyn, would you have spared your father after everything he did, or would you have let Chayton take his revenge? Let me know your answer in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for next week's saga. Thanks for watching.